Good morning, everyone. So yesterday I got a couple questions in response to the video that I did about the fall container updates, where they really wanted to understand my thought process start to finish in terms of how I go about planting and how I pick the flowers and things like that. So I figured I would take 5-10 minutes today just to walk you through from start to finish what it is that I do. So again, this is very specific to me, and this is what I have found works for me. A lot of people do it differently, and that's perfectly fine. Zone also comes into play here. So I am in northern New Jersey. I'm a zone 6B/7. So you want to think through that piece of it as well. So let me take you through from start to finish what I do. So let's talk about soil. So as it is with everything that you're planting, whether it be in the ground or in planters, soil is really key. So using a really good quality soil is important. I try to stay away from Miracle-Gro. My top three that I tend to lean towards are either Espoma, Fox Farm, or Coast of Maine. Those are the ones that I feel have really good drainage, that provide really good nutrients for the plants, and that will take me all the way from the spring season through the end of fall. I've also seen people, when their pots or planters tend to be rather large, they try to use money-saving hacks by either putting stones at the bottom of their plants or upside down planters at the bottom of their pots, or some sort of other kind of debris to not use as much soil. It's really not the best idea. If you think about it, the plants that you're going to be putting in there are annuals. Annuals grow really, really fast because they're such a short-lived plant, and they need room for their root system to grow. So if they run out of soil, they're now growing into some other debris, they're just not going to perform as well for you. And it also tends to mess with the water levels within the potting soil. So if that soil isn't going all the way to the bottom of the pot, it's just going to raise the water level, which could potentially cause root rot. And then you've kind of wasted all that money on the plants that you purchased rather than having filled it with soil anyway. So start with a really good quality soil. Now, every season, I don't necessarily throw out the previous year's potting soil. What I do is I add some compost to it. So I take out about half the potting soil that's in the pot currently. I add some more compost to it. I'm not a purist in terms of what compost I use. I use whatever brand I can pick up either at the garden center or even at Home Depot. I mix that in with the old potting soil from last year, and that is how I freshen it up. Because what you will notice is if you are constantly putting in new potting soil every year, it can get very expensive very quickly in terms of between the potting soil, the plants, and everything like that. And I like to freshen my pots up anywhere between 3 to 4 times a year, depending on the season. So I try to save on cost where I can, but also making sure that it's logical in terms of where I'm saving on the cost so that I'm not spending more on the back end. You want to make sure that the planter that you have has a really nice drainage hole, because again, that is another thing that can cause an issue. If that soil isn't really letting the water through, you can run into root rot, and then that'll kill the plant as well. The next thing you want to think about is your growing season. So are you planting your pots in spring? Are you planting it in summer? Or are you planting it in fall or more for winter interest? And the reason that you want to think about this is depending on the growing season, your growth rate is going to vary drastically. So hopefully you saw when I had planted the fall planters, I really jam-packed those in. And I had made a comment that it was because the growing season wasn't very long. These plants are not going to grow massive. So these plants are probably going to be in these the planters for about maybe a month or a month and a half before our first frost. A month and a half is probably stretching it. So you can really jam pack them in. Same thing for spring planters. So if you're probably planting somewhere in my zone, somewhere around that April-May timeframe, you're probably going to be refreshing that by the time June comes, because that's when the really hot summer months are going to start hitting. So again, for spring, you can jam pack those in because they're not going to grow as rapidly as they are in the spring. Now, once you get in the summer, excuse me. Now, once you get to summer, there you want to leave a little bit more room, because there you're probably going to not refresh your pots for quite as long. So you're probably going to refresh somewhere at the end of June, and you're going to leave them in for July, August, and probably the better half of September. So you have 3 months of growth that you can get out of those planters. So there you don't want to jam pack them in, because you want to give their roots enough time to grow. And also the plants will suffocate each other if they start growing on top of each other, and that could potentially lead to other issues such as pest problems or mildew and things like that. So that's the other thing that you want to think about, is your pot size and what part of the growing season that you're in, so you're buying the appropriate amount of plants for the pots. All right, the next thing is probably the most fun thing. It's actually going to pick the plants. And the amount of plants that you put in there really is no rule of thumb. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, you want to stick to an odd number of plants, or you want to make sure you have a thriller, spiller, and a filler. And there is no hard set rule. It's basically what you like. So if you really just want to go with one plant, great, go with one plant, and it could still be really beautiful. Like, for example, if you pick a Supertunia and you put one in that pot, if you treat it appropriately and you fertilize it and you water it regularly, it will be huge and gorgeous by the end of the summer season. So that's okay. I like the thriller, filler, spiller rule, depending on the time of year. Sometimes it can be a little bit tiring because there are a lot of plants that can go into a pot. So let me take you through what I had done with these planters the other day. So you guys are probably like, what are you talking about with the thriller, spiller, filler rule? So what that basically is what you want to think about are the different height levels and the different reasons for the plants to be. So your thriller is going to be something really tall. For me, in this instance, that is this Malay. So right now it's not tall, and you guys are probably like, you didn't follow the rule at all, but this is going to grow to anywhere between 3 to 5 feet tall. So it's going to be nice and tall to add that varying height within the plant. Your filler is exactly what it sounds like, where it just is going to fill in the base of the plant. So for me, that's this celosia, that is some of this kale, and that's really going to fill in. Now, the reason I love the kale is because it also is kind of like a two-parter, right? So it is filling in the base of the plant at a different height from the celosia, but it also, based off of how I angled it, can act like a spiller, which is basically that it is filling over the sides of the plant. So I angled it on its side so that it's hiding the edges of the planter. That is what the purpose of this sedum is also. So it's going to start slowly, and it's not going to drape all the way down, but it's just going to hang over the sides of the plant. So that's basic of the planter, excuse me. So that's basically, if you want to think through it's basically different height levels. The other thing that you want to think through is leaf textures and colors. So this would be a lot for the eye if you looked at it and it was all just one color. So I really wanted to go in and make sure that I'm picking plants that are complementary to each other, but not necessarily the same color. So for example, if I had this chartreuse colored Malay and it was next to a chartreuse celosia, it's not enough of a contrast for you to see from far away, and it would just end up looking a little bit too busy for the eye. You got everything planted, now what? Again, it goes back to what time of year it is, right? So these plants right here, I'm probably not going to fertilize all that often. I maybe will fertilize them once, and that's a maybe. Ideally, ideally annuals need a lot of fertilizer, but that's really more towards the summer months when you get a lot of growth. Spring and fall planters do not need a lot of fertilizer. And when I say a lot of fertilizer, ideally you want to be fertilizing 1 to 2 times a week. Reality is that doesn't happen. I got way too much going on with my family and everything to remember to fertilize my plants. So I try to hit them at least once a month. That seems to be okay. So fertilizer is key. Water is another thing that's also key. So in the summer months, when it tends to be a little bit drier here, humidity is high, it's really, really hot, you got to make sure that you're out there at least once a day watering your planters. You can also run drip to it. I have a hard time with the drip because I have a hard time hiding the irrigation lines, which I don't always love. So you do need to make sure you're out with your hose in terms of watering. In the fall and spring, where rainfall is happens a little bit more often, you don't need to water as often, and it also doesn't get as hot, which means that you don't need to water as often. Getting back to the fertilizer, I really like to lean towards organic fertilizers. Again, I really try to stay away from Miracle-Gro. Too much Miracle-Gro can cause the roots to burn, and it again provides more injury to the plants than being helpful. So I try to stay more towards whether it's fish emulsion or anything that is more of an organic base, because you really can't overdo it. I'm not a purist in terms of what I choose. I just try to stay away from that one product, like I mentioned before. And if you keep those tips in mind, you should do really pretty well throughout the seasons. Hopefully I helped clarify any of the questions that you had, and hopefully I didn't create more questions. But if I did, please drop me a line or write in the comments what other questions that you have, or if you have any other tips that work for you that I didn't mention or didn't even know about, please leave those in the comments. All right, hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.